Thank you for that intro. That was lovely. Thank you for having me. I have to say, though, you say that I'm controversial and I get a lot of hate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I've ever experienced that. I'm pretty sure everyone loves me.
Oh, well, I look, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I knew who the fuck you were and all about you when I met you some months ago in Irvine, California. I knew very little about you. Um, and I found you to be a quite delightful person, insightful. Um, and we got to hang out a little bit afterwards at Catherine Lou's house. And you were with the cool kids, and Ben and I and Cedric and our friend. I think even our friend left. Didn't Jordan leave for a minute? It was like me, you, and Cedric, and we were just keeping to ourselves. And you came over to our little area of the place and inserted yourself, and we had a grand old time talking a gang of shit. So I
Yeah.
have no problem with you, and I don't understand why the rest of the internet has a problem with you. They're missing out.
Yeah, I think if anyone of any high enough profile is going to have haters, but I gotta say, I feel like I should have a higher profile for the amount of attention people pay attention. Like I should be making more money if people are talking about me that much. I think I'm entitled to it. But yeah, that is the number one thing that people who don't know about me say after they met me. They're like, "Hey, I Googled you and I found out like there's someone who got really mad at you once." Or if they do know who I am, sometimes they're like, "You're really nice in person." And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
yeah.
I am really nice."
There is a disarming Midwestern charm, and let's you talk about that. And you open your book talking about your life in Indiana.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that whole
I am,
section of the book, I kept thinking, you know, I mean, I grew up in mid Michigan, and I just that upbringing feels so cosmopolitan
as
as I'm
as
reading this. I never once had to like get a cow out of the way, right? To drive down the street, where I grew up.
um your hometown. Well, let's call Indiana your hometown, even though it's a state and you
Yeah,
lived
yeah.
all over the state. You moved a lot. I will also say this: there's a lot in reading your book that think mirrored my life.
Mm.
So I was like, oh man, this woman's even more interesting now that I'm reading this book than when we were hanging out in person. Your hometown is nestled deeply in flyover country. You mentioned in the book meeting the writer of one of my favorite movies, Heathers.
Yeah,
Also a
Dan's
native of the
amazing.
Hoosier state, and you
Yep.
asked why he chose to set Heathers in Ohio and not Indiana, and you replied because people can imagine living in Ohio. What is it about Indiana that seems so foreign to people? What do they get wrong about it, and what do you appreciate about where you're from?
Um, I I think the thing about Indiana is that everyone has something they can say about almost every state. Indiana, our state motto is Crossroads of America,
Yeah,
which sounds a little bit like Rest Stop of America.
and it's not. That's Iowa, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's a place you go to or you go through trying to get somewhere else.
Mhm,
Unless you're a sports fan, like specifically a basketball fan, you probably
mhm,
don't have any relationship to them. There's just not a lot going on. Our capital city, Indianapolis, we call it Naptown. And there's a lot of rural areas,
mhm,
and the industrial areas have been in decline, like Gary. And the place where I went to high school had it was both a failed agriculture and a failed industrial town. So it was like the farms all got bought by Monsanto, and the steel mills shut down. So just nobody had anything. I think it makes us uh,
and dogs from
it
Indiana as well.
makes us get very large dogs. Hey, come here. All right. Let me let me do something real quick
Sure.
because this will keep happening with every. Where I live now, there are a lot of coyotes, and the dogs are very upset by the coyotes. Just a moment, I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. Ben, as a Midwesterner, you have a disarming aw shucksness about you. What do you love about being from East Lansing, Michigan?
Yeah. What do I love about it? I mean, I do like it. Like I used to, my parents no longer live there. They actually just, moved to a slightly different part of California, like, I don't know, year and a half before I did. But but every used to be right that, like, every year for a few weeks in the summer and a couple weeks in the winter, I would go to visit. And like the summer in particular, like I definitely felt very like very like physically relaxed right every time I got there. And had the like the sort of summer temperature felt right. I'm a big fan of Bell's beer. Hockey, right? I like hockey. I don't know if that yeah, that is actually kind of funny. I did not see that shot until you said so. Just all the clutter on top of that bookcase. Yeah, right. But yes, even as a root beer-less cosmopolitan, there is something about the Midwest that, my part of the upper Midwest, right? That I've always liked. I've always liked coming back to, when I went back. I mean, there is like maybe a certain kind of groundedness. I don't want to like wax too romantic about that, but I mean, I think it is a thing. And I don't know. I mean, like, I also like the fact that, I mean, this is pretty sub-regionally specific maybe, but like, and I know it's true of lots of other places too, but like, I don't know. I also like the fact that I came from a place where like lots of people had good jobs because of the UAW historically, and that gave them like a decent standard of living. And there was just kind of a lot of just general ambient awareness that was a thing, right? That's like a thing that like lots of people living there had used to get like a kind of decent life for themselves and their families. And, that's even though a lot of that's like declined, since I was a kid, I mean, obviously everybody's seen Roger and Me or whatever, but like, that's still, I think that, I think I probably benefited in my view of the world from like, just kind of growing up around that a little bit, in proximity to it. I don't know if any of that really answers your question though.
It sounds like that your environment shaped your politics more than anything else, especially in the book. Amber, you talk about your grandparents quite a bit and how they talked about union jobs and things like that. And then, you also talk about the steel mill that was no longer a steel mill and how labor laws got reset when the steel mill got bought out. So it sounds like Indiana and East Lansing, Michigan really kind of set your guys' political trajectory into leftism, which I think a lot of people probably can't fathom.
It's interesting too, because I don't know. First of all, Ben, I love that you said I don't want to romanticize it too much, which is the most Midwestern thing you could possibly say. you're basically shucks, jeez, yes,
Shucks.
But I don't know if you were aware of it at the time, and I was aware of like, oh, things used to be better, but it wasn't literally till I moved to New York where I was like, actually, no, it was a little bit. It was when I moved to Bloomington, like college town. That's when I sort of started to figure out. I knew that right to work was going to be bad. I knew that NAFTA has been bad, but assembling things and getting a whole picture of it, I don't think I really got together until I joined DSA, which was a very different organization back then. I don't know. What do you think? Did you get it at the time?
To some extent, yeah. I mean, this is like is kind of, I think it was maybe hard to miss that some things had gotten worse, right? And that was, related to that picture about, about NAFTA and all that. I mean, certainly in the, case of Michigan, right? I mean, Donald Trump might not have become president if people there weren't still pissed off about that, so because like you had in, like those like Malika Jabali reports after 2016 that, you had all of these people, there was all this whole narrative after the 2016 election about the WWC. That was like a acronym people were using for like a few months before everybody started talking about Russia instead. That stood for, the white working class, which is a phrase that always annoyed me because it made it sound like that's a distinct entity, right?
Right.
From working class people of other skin tones. But but yeah, I mean, like forgetting people who voted for Trump, just like the number of people who like left their ballots blank, right? Would have, would have taken Hillary over the top. So yeah, I mean, I think I did get it to, to a certain extent growing up, but, it's definitely, yeah, I mean, definitely later. I mean, like, I don't know. I can remember visiting, Fred in Detroit in like the late 90s, which was like an hour and a half away from where I grew up. And, like seeing a lot there that's actually gotten slightly better since then, but like was sort of like something from a dystopian science fiction movie, right? Is like, like RoboCopy, right? The sort of state of like parts of the city by that point, right? So it's like that I definitely got, but this is actually good because this is something I wanted to ask about the book, right? Like that you do spend quite a bit of time talking about deindustrialization and also reindustrialization, which is something that I feel like a lot of people on the left don't necessarily spend that much time talking about or thinking about, right? So you make a big point in the book of saying, hey, people talk about this as if like offshoring of manufacturing and all of that was just sort of this this thing that happened in nature, right? That there's like some sort of physical law that's outside of anybody's control, and you just sort of have to make the best of it. And certainly like mainstream pundits have talked that way forever, but like even some leftists have kind of started talking that way. And you really forcefully kind of make the point. It's like, no, this is all sort of under human control.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's obviously, we both know that there are some very major factors in that shift. One is that there just has been a decline in the industrial worker. So, there's not a lot of people left to advocate for themselves. Two, the left, or whatever you want to call it, has become very college educated. I even know that I was taught like, you climb up the income ladder by going to college. Joke's on me. But they have internalized this idea that, whatever, logistics, driving a truck, working in a factory, the hard hat jobs, construction builders, we could talk about a lot of industries, but like the traditional backbone of an industrial labor force is like passe or something. It's like, well, we still need steel. So why? What brought you to the conclusion that that this is over, or that it has to be over? That there's an inevitability. It's a real narrowing of sort of ambitions, but it's also just this kind of. I don't like the word classist because it's sort of confusing to people. I think it means being. I think it's useful in some ways where people, that just means sort of like snobby. But there's this false impression that there's no one who wants those jobs, that those are sick, miserable jobs. And that's just not true. I mean, they have been historically really brutal. Marx talked about the satanic mills, but there's nothing, again, that says that those have to be brutal jobs. I'm a big believer in workers having a geography that they share. I talked about this somewhere else, but I think it was teachers union. One of the things they wanted was a break room that the principal wasn't allowed to come into. It's something that a lot of factory workers have fought for too. you need to be next to each other. You can't really, I mean, like physically next to each other. We're not going to have a bunch of remote workers organizing. And plus, the industrial worker, the logistics, manufacturing, builders, they don't have to go to college and spend tens of thousands of dollars to get those jobs. In many ways, college graduates are really disadvantaged. And by that, I mean, they're not in a good position to fight, not like, oh, poor college graduates. I think it kind of sucks for everybody, but to expect them to be, the, I guess, what would you call it? The shock troops of socialism is highly unrealistic for a number of reasons.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is something that, I think that people sort of sometimes hear that, and I wonder if like some of, some of the impulse towards saying, oh, it doesn't really matter what people are doing for a living, we'll just sort of organize that. It's like, of course, everybody should have a union, no question, right? You should support organized efforts everywhere. But there are reasons why strategically it's like very unlikely that that people in other sectors of the economy are going to be able to play the kind of role that traditionally, manufacturing workers, miners, etc., have played in the workers' movement.
Graphic designers are not in a very good position to lead the charge. And I mean, anyone who has to pay for college is in a really bad position. But people are just really remotely working so much now that it just seems silly to me to think that you're going to develop the kind of relationships and the sense of trust. Moreover, the gig economy, it's really, how do you organize when people have impermanent work?
Well, I don't know if you guys remember, but before Proposition 22 happened, when AB 5 was rolling out in California, I don't know if you were in California at this time, Amber, when AB 5 rolled out first, there was a burgeoning organization of Uber and Lyft drivers that were trying to organize against 22, and it didn't work. It's to your guys' point, it's really hard to organize when we are so atomized. That being said, shifting to the next question, which is kind of a big part of your book, and that is your trifecta of leftists: masochists, pedophiles, and necrophiliacs.
Right. Just spent this whole thing at the beginning talking about what a nice girl she is, and then now,
I call everybody a pervert.
Hey, I also said it's a sexy book as well.